station. This is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Yes, I'm ready for the event.
Hartsfield Elementary School, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
I have you loud and clear.
Great. We are excited to learn more about you and life as an astronaut.
Actually, I've wanted to become an astronaut for a long time, so I'm looking forward to answering all your questions.
Who was your role model growing up?
My role model growing up was actually probably my parents. They live and work on a farm, and they still do to this day. And they are two of the hardest working people I know. And I think I learned that work ethic from them and that drive. And I think that's what helped make me successful in my pursuit of a goal to become an astronaut.
When did you decide to focus on becoming an astronaut?
Actually, I happened to think I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 9 years old and watched the first guys walk on the moon. But it really didn't become, I think, a goal for me until I graduated from high school. And that was the year they first picked female astronauts. So that's when I decided I wanted to become an astronaut. And it was a very, very difficult thing, but again, that determination paid off for me.
What would you be if you were not an astronaut?
I think if I weren't an astronaut, I would still be working at NASA. I love NASA and what it stands for, the exploration of space, understanding more about our planet and where it came from, understanding more about the stars. That whole exploration process to me is very interesting and something that appealed to me. So I think I would still work at NASA. There are a lot of folks who work at NASA who aren't astronauts, and I think that's what I would do.
What was your most memorable space experience?
Well, living up here every day is actually an incredibly memorable experience. Becoming used to being in zero gravity, where you can float in all different kinds of directions, and it all feels the same. You work here and live here. It's actually extremely memorable, but probably the most significant thing is actually doing a spacewalk. And I think when you're out in a spacesuit, it's like being in your own little individual spaceship and being able to see our huge structure. You're just looking at one module that we live in, and there's many modules up here. The truss structure that holds the solar arrays is longer than a football field. It's really amazing, this technical achievement we have. And then you get the beauty of planet Earth below us to look at. So all of it is very spectacular, but I think the spacewalk is probably the most memorable.
How did it feel to make history and become the first woman commander of an expedition?
Well, in many ways, it was never something that I had necessarily planned on for a long time. But as I worked at NASA and after I'd flown a space flight, it became obvious to me that I could do the role of being a commander. And I just set my sights on trying to do that as well. I was never setting my sights on the role of being the first female commander, but it worked out that way. I was very lucky in that regard, and I guess to be the first, it was very much an honor to me, and it's a huge privilege to be able to do it again.
What events do you miss most on Earth with your decision to spend time researching life in space?
I think probably the thing I miss the most from Earth is just actually visiting with friends and family. I can talk to them on the internet protocol phone that we have. It's kind of like a Skype phone. We don't always have video, but it's actually great to be able to stay in touch. But just hanging out with friends and family, I think, is the thing I miss most.
What were the keys to reaching your career goals?
I think that determination and work ethic, I think, were key for me. I had to study really hard in school to do well, but that paid off, that all the studying paid off for me. So I think determination and work ethic are extremely important.
How does the food you grow in space taste differently from Earth?
That's a good question. We've grown a couple of different things up here in space. When I got here, Shane was already growing some lettuce. And then after that, I grew some stuff that was called Chinese cabbage, but was also very similar to lettuce. And it tasted great. We had the opportunity to harvest it and eat some of it. It didn't really taste different other than it's very unique up here to have fresh vegetables. And so it tasted fantastic, better than any lettuce I've ever had on the ground.
When do you think civilians begin to live in space?
Actually, that's a really good question. And we have a lot of commercial companies now in the United States who are trying to commercialize access to space. And I think that we are not that far away. So I'm sure that in your lifetimes you will see a time where anyone can buy a seat and go to space.
Describe what Earth looks like from your view.
Well, we're about 250 miles above the Earth, going at 17,500 miles an hour. And our view of the Earth is actually, it covers most of our view below us. And obviously, about half of the time we're in the sunshine and half of the time we're in nighttime. We go around the Earth about once every 90 minutes. And watching a sunrise and a sunset every 40 minutes is quite spectacular. But to me, I think the most beautiful thing about our planet is looking at the limb of the Earth, the curve of the Earth that we can see from our viewpoint, especially at sunrise and sunset. It is an amazing time.
What is your favorite book and why?
I think, growing up, my favorite book was Illusions by Richard Bach. And I think it had one saying in it that I think is very important. And you're never given a wish without also being given the power to make it true. You may have to work for it, however.
Did you have any fears on your first expedition?
That's a good question. I think probably the thing I was most afraid of was making mistakes, and, that's something we don't want to do. None of us want to do that. So I think that was probably the biggest fear, but we do a lot of training, and that really helps us and prepares us for those situations where, for instance, if we had a bad day on station, we practice all the emergencies that we would do so that we understand what our role and responsibility would be during those emergencies. So I think because of all the training, there were not so many fears. It's just other than, in general, I don't want to make mistakes. And so that was my biggest fear.
What was your favorite subject in elementary school?
My favorite subject was biology. I think that was probably my first love. I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in biology and another bachelor's degree in chemistry, and later biochemistry for my PhD.
What new investigations are your crew members working on?
Actually, the one investigation that I'm working on right now that am enjoying the most is looking at stem cell growth. These are special cells that are that can be used potentially in the future to help fight cancer. There's some cell and gene therapies now, and these special cells make it possible to do these kind of therapies. But the thing that we're trying to do here is see if we can grow them, proliferate them, grow them in big batches, maybe better than we can on Earth, and try and understand that process. And since one of the things that I did in my research was growing tissues, it's called tissue culture, I really enjoy it.
What was your most memorable 4-H club experience?
Actually, that's an easy question because growing up, I was very shy, and I'm still an introverted person, and so it's very difficult to do public speaking. But growing up and in 4-H Club, I had to give presentations in public and to groups. Initially, just the 4-H Club, and then it expanded and doing presentations in the community. And eventually, I did presentations at the state fair, which was a pretty big deal for me, as shy as I was. And so, being able to overcome that hurdle was very important.
What are the top 3 tunes on your music playlist?
Actually, I enjoy lots of different music. Probably the 3 groups I listen the most to are Coldplay and Train and Imagine Dragons.
What would you change on the International Space Station?
What would I change on the International Space Station? I think that's actually a really good question. And generally, I would say I would like to have even more laboratories. But after the work I was doing the last couple of days, I think I want more closets.
In late April, you will surpass Jeff Williams' record for the American with the most cumulative time in space. How does this accomplishment feel?
I think setting records in exploration is very important. It shows that we're advancing in our capabilities. And so I think setting the record is extremely important. I don't think who holds the records is important, and I hope that someone will surpass my record in the very near future. And I hope that you young people in your futures will surpass all the records that you encounter.
Mm-hmm.
What does your family think about your accomplishments in space?
Well, I hope they're proud. I think they are.
What words of encouragement do you have for our student body?
Actually, that's really easy. I think it is important for young people to dream big, and I mean really big. Think about things that you might not imagine or see yourself doing, and imagine yourself there, and then pursue it as a goal, because you can accomplish it. So dream big.
Good morning. This is Mr. Johnson, the principal here at Hartsfield. Could you tell my scholars about the module that you're in and maybe point out some of the things that are around you for them to see?
Sure thing. That's a great question. Here, right next to me, I was telling you about the stem cell research I was doing. And I actually have a microscope set up here, and it's hooked up to a camera so that the ground team can look at it and see what I'm doing. So that's really fun to be able to do that. We've got lots of different things here. Right next to me here is the CVIS. It's a cycle ergometer that we use for exercise. We exercise about 2.5 hours every day because we don't want to lose bone mass or muscle strength while we're up here, because when you're floating around like this, your bones and muscles just don't get the same stimulation that they do on the ground. So we have to exercise every day. We have laptops everywhere that control different experiments. This is a barrier. We have a very interesting experiment going on inside here with a large microscope, and the ground team is watching and following the experiment as it's going on. And further back here, you can see we have a robotic workstation. This controls our 17-meter arm that's outside. So by using these hand controllers and the monitors, we can control that large robotic arm that's outside. And that's really important for doing various activities. And the ground team can control it, or we can control it here from the module. And we capture the visiting vehicle. For instance, last week, Thomas and Shane captured the SpaceX Dragon vehicle. It's a cargo craft, and it comes in close to the station and hovers, and then using the robotic arm, we go out and grab it and then set it on the station and then unload all the supplies from inside. And then using the arm, we can take payloads out of the outside and attach them to the station. So it's actually very neat hardware.
Thank you for that. My last and final question would be, what could you say to our scholars here about, as far as being future researchers, what is the most important thing that you learn to do to become a great researcher?
That's actually a really good question. I think being questioning, developing hypothesis, developing a theory for why you think something might be happening, and then figuring out the right experiment to test and prove or disprove that hypothesis is very important in scientific research. And actually, you know, it's actually a good thing to keep in mind in terms of how you approach life. You don't want to have a preconceived notion necessarily of an outcome, but if you can make a plan and a hypothesis and figure out what was accurate and what was not accurate about what you had imagined it to be. But definitely pursue those goals, because and answer the questions, look for questions and try and answer them. I think that's important.
Were you able to see the movie Hidden Figures? And if so, what did you think?
Actually, they sent it up to us prior, actually, to when it opened, which was really special for us to get to watch it up here on orbit. I had read the book, and so I was really impressed with how it was portrayed in the movie. And obviously, it's an incredible story of some incredible women.
We at Huntsville Elementary want to say thank you so much, Dr. Woodson, for taking the time to talk with us. We appreciate this memorable experience.
Well, you guys had fantastic questions, and it was really a blast to talk to you. And I'm going to just show you one last little space trick, okay? See if you like this.